In the howling dark of a sudden Highland blizzard, Finlay Kerr burst from the woods onto the moonlit road, chest heaving, as the deranged man in short sleeves, skin mottled purple, eyes wild with frozen madness, screamed and lunged from the shadows, impossibly close despite the endless drifts between them. Finlay didn't look back, sprinting the final stretch home. The image of that twisted smile burned into his mind like frostbite. Behind him, the storm swallowed the figure's howls, but the terror clung tighter than the cold. If this heart-stopping pursuit has you on edge, subscribe now. The full descent into dread awaits, and nothing feels safe afterward. The platform emptied behind him with a metallic sigh as the train pulled away, its lights swallowed almost instantly by the storm. Silence rushed in to replace it, heavy and unnatural, broken only by the wind scraping ice along the rails. Finlay stood there a moment longer than he meant to, letting the reality settle. No more schedules. No second chances. Just him, the snow, and the long way home. The highway was a pale ribbon barely distinguishable from the fields beside it, the lines erased as if the world had been rubbed clean. Snow drove sideways, stinging any skin it touched. Finlay pulled his scarf higher, tugged his gloves tighter, and crossed anyway, boots crunching through drifts that were already knee-deep in places. Each step demanded attention. Each breath burned. The woods loomed ahead, dark shapes pressing against the white glare. In summer, he knew every bend of that path, every fallen log and shortcut. Tonight, the trees felt closer together, their branches knitting overhead, swallowing what little light remained. The wind softened there, but the quiet sharpened instead. His ears rang with it. He could hear his own heartbeat, the rasp of his breath, the soft squeal of snow underfoot. Halfway in, doubt crept up on him. Not panic, not yet, but the cold realization of distance. No signal. No footprints behind him that stayed longer than seconds. If he fell, if he twisted an ankle, if the cold crept too deep into his fingers, no one would know for hours. Maybe longer. He pushed on anyway, counting steps like he did on long runs, turning fear into rhythm. 1, 2, 3. Keep moving. His father's voice echoed in his head, steady and practical. So did the laughter of his friends from earlier, warm and careless, already belonging to another world. Snow dusted his eyelashes, blurred his vision. The forest groaned as wind bent trunks and shed heavy clumps from high branches, each thud making him flinch. Still, somewhere beneath the fear, there was a strange clarity. No distractions. No noise. Just survival and the promise of home ahead. Isolation pressed in from all sides, but Finlay kept walking, shoulders squared, breath steady, carving his path through the white void one step at a time. The cottage stood at the edge of the moors as though it had wandered there long ago and decided to stay. Its stones were the color of old ash, rough to the touch, fitted together by hands that believed in patience. In summer, the heather crept close and bees worried the window boxes. In winter, the land pulled back, leaving the house exposed to wind and sky, a solitary shape against a vast, indifferent sweep. Finlay had grown up learning the moods of that place. He knew when the moors were restless and when they lay quiet, holding their breath under frost. He knew which floorboard would groan at night and how the chimney sighed just before snow. Since his mother's death 2 winters earlier, these small certainties mattered more than they ever had. They were things that stayed. The accident itself had been sudden and senseless, the kind that refused to be shaped into a story with meaning. One moment there had been plans for supper and a half-finished conversation, the next there had been a phone call, a voice too careful, too slow. Finley remembered the way the world had seemed to tilt, how sound had dulled as though cotton had been stuffed into his ears. He remembered his father sitting very still at the table, hands flat, as if bracing himself against a strong current. After that, something had shifted in Finley. Not overnight, not with any grand decision, but quietly, the way ice thickens on a pond. He became the one who noticed when the woodpile ran low, when Mara's boots pinched her toes, when the bills arrived in the wrong order. He did not resent it. Steadiness felt necessary, almost instinctive, like setting a bone so it could heal. Most mornings began before dawn. Finley would dress in the half-light, pulling on layers against the cold, careful not to wake Mara. The kettle waited until he returned. Running came first. He stepped outside into air that burned his lungs clean and set off across the moors, following paths worn into the land long before he was born. At first, he had run out of anger, the sharp, restless kind that had nowhere to go. Later, it became something else. A way to think without thinking. A way to let grief move through him instead of settling. His feet found a rhythm, his breath a steady count. The moors opened around him, endless and bare, and for a while there was only movement and sky. Sometimes memories surfaced uninvited. His mother laughing at his muddy shoes. Her hand warm at the back of his neck when she leaned over his drawings. When that happened, he ran harder, faster, until the ache blurred into effort. When he returned home, cheeks flushed and legs trembling, he felt lighter, as though he had left something behind out there among the heather. Inside, the house smelled of damp stone and old books. His father would already be awake, boots by the door, coat shrugged on. Work had become his refuge. He took extra shifts, accepted any task that kept his hands busy and his thoughts elsewhere. There were days when Finley hardly saw him except in passing, a nod exchanged in the narrow hallway, a muttered question about supper. They spoke, but rarely about anything that mattered. Practicalities filled the space between them. The fence. The weather. Mara's schooling. Finley sensed the grief his father carried, heavy and unresolved, but it was locked behind a door neither of them knew how to open. So they circled it, careful not to knock. Mara drifted through the days like a shadow. She had once been loud, full of questions and laughter, but now she seemed to exist just to the side of things. Words came slowly to her, if at all. She spent hours by the window, watching the moors as if expecting them to speak. Finley tried not to push. He learned her silences the way he learned the weather. When she needed company, she leaned closer. When she needed space, she pulled away. He left mugs of tea where she would find them, sliced apples just the way she liked, their skins curling neatly on the plate. Sometimes she responded with the smallest smile, fleeting but real, and he held on to those moments as proof that she was still there. Evenings drew them together whether they wanted it or not. The cottage had only so many rooms, only so much warmth to offer. Finley spread his books across the small table near the fire. He studied with a focus that surprised even him. Each page turned felt like a step forward, a promise kept. He imagined his mother watching, her approval quiet but steady. She had always believed in effort over talent, in showing up even when it was hard. When doubt crept in, he reminded himself that he was doing this for her, for Mara, for the version of himself that had once assumed the future would be simple. When the numbers and words blurred, he reached for his sketchbook. Drawing had been his first language, long before he learned to explain himself aloud. The pencil moved easily in his hand, mapping hills and fences, clouds heavy with snow. He rarely drew people anymore. Landscapes were safer. They asked nothing of him and revealed just enough in return. In those sketches, the moors became a mirror. Vast, resilient, marked by weather but not undone by it. He shaded carefully, building depth and distance, hiding the ache in layers of graphite. Anyone looking closely might sense something beneath the quiet lines, but they would have to search for it. Nights were the hardest. When the house settled and the fire burned low, Finley lay awake listening. The wind rattled the windows. The old clock ticked on, relentless. Sometimes he rose and stood in the doorway of his father's room, just long enough to hear the steady rhythm of sleep. Then he checked on Mara, adjusting the blanket she kicked loose, brushing hair from her eyes. In those moments, the weight of responsibility pressed hardest. He felt stretched between who he was and who he had become, uncertain where one ended and the other began. He wondered if steadiness, once assumed, could ever be set down. One night, a storm arrived without warning. Snow lashed the windows, driven by a wind that howled like something alive. The power flickered, then failed entirely. Darkness filled the cottage, sudden and absolute. Finley found the candles by touch. He lit them one by one, the flames casting unsteady halos across the walls. His father emerged from the back room, face drawn but calm. Mara appeared at Finley's side, close enough that he felt her warmth through his sleeve. They sat together, the three of them, the storm raging just beyond the glass. The moors disappeared into white, erased and remade in the same instant. For a while, no one spoke. The silence was not empty, just heavy. His father cleared his throat. Mentioned the lines being old, the need to report it in the morning. Practical words, carefully chosen. Finley nodded. Mara leaned into him fully now, her head resting against his shoulder. He wrapped an arm around her without thinking. In the candlelight, he studied their faces. The lines that grief had etched. The familiar angles. This was what remained. Fragile, imperfect, still standing. The storm passed as quickly as it had come. The power returned with a faint hum, lights blinking uncertainly back to life. The room regained its edges. Mara pulled away, embarrassed, and Finley pretended not to notice. Later, alone in his room, he opened his sketchbook once more. He drew the cottage as it had looked in the storm, a small, stubborn shape against the white. He added the faintest glow at the windows, barely visible, but there. When he finally closed the book, there was a sense, not of resolution, but of direction. Tomorrow would come. He would run. He would study. He would keep showing up, even when it hurt, even when he was tired. Outside, the moors lay quiet under fresh snow, unbroken and waiting. The highway should not have been empty. Finley noticed it the moment he crested the last rise and the road unfolded before him, long and pale beneath the streetlights. No headlights cut through the dark. No engines murmured in the distance. No rumble of plows, no blinking hazard lights, no sign that the world beyond the moors was awake at all. It felt paused, as if someone had reached out and stilled everything mid-breath. He slowed to a stop. Snow lay thick and unbroken across the asphalt, smoothing the road into something almost gentle. The lamps along the highway cast a soft amber glow, and the snow caught it eagerly, scattering light back in sharp, glittering points. Diamonds, he thought, absurdly. The kind you only saw in shop windows or illustrations, never strewn so carelessly across a road meant for speed and noise. The wind eased for a moment, and in that quiet the beauty of it struck him full force. The world looked remade. Clean. Untouched. Even the grief he carried felt briefly muted, as though the snow had laid a hand over it and said, "Wait. I'll never see this again," he murmured, the words fogging the air. The thought came uninvited but certain. This exact stillness. This strange, luminous silence. Tomorrow the plows would come. Tires would carve brown slush into the white. The spell would break. The world would go back to being loud and heavy and complicated. For a heartbeat, he considered turning back. There was no real reason to be out here. He could return to the cottage, to the fire and the steady tick of the clock. He could tell himself that discipline mattered, that routine was safety, that beauty like this was a warning, not an invitation. But the road stretched on, empty and shining, and something restless stirred in him. He checked his watch. He was already running later than usual. The wind picked up again, sharper now, needling through his layers and tugging at the hood of his jacket. Snow lifted from the ground in fine, stinging sheets, skittering across the road like living things. He exhaled, slow and measured. The woods lay just ahead, a dark mass to the right where the road curved away. The shortcut. He had taken it 100 times, in rain and frost, under clear skies and low cloud. A narrow trail wound through the trees, cutting the long bend of the highway nearly in half. Faster. Familiar. Sheltered, at least in parts, from the worst of the wind. His father's voice surfaced in his mind, practical and distant, "Don't be stupid in weather like this." His mother's followed, gentler but no less firm, "Beauty doesn't mean safe, Finn." He stood there, torn between the open, glittering road and the dark mouth of the woods. The highway felt exposed now, the wind sweeping across it unchecked. The snow there was beautiful, yes, but it was also deep, already drifting higher in places. Running straight into it would be slow. Hard. He imagined fighting it for miles, legs burning, time slipping away. The woods, by contrast, promised efficiency. The trees would break the wind. The path was known to his feet, each route and dip mapped into muscle memory. He could be in and out quickly, back home before the storm worsened. The wind howled again, louder this time, rushing down from the moors with a force that made the lights shudder on their poles. Somewhere far off, something cracked, a branch giving way under the weight of snow. Finley pulled his hood tighter and made his decision. He left the highway and stepped into the trees. The change was immediate. The light dropped away, swallowed by branches heavy with snow. The air felt different here, still, but tense, as if holding itself too tightly. The path narrowed under his boots, its edges already softening, the snow disguising stones and roots beneath a smooth, treacherous surface. He broke into a jog, breath loud in his ears. At first, it felt right. Familiar. The trees rose around him like old acquaintances, dark trunks standing sentinel on either side. Snow sifted down as the wind shook the upper branches, dusting his shoulders, his hair. He settled into a rhythm, trusting his body to remember what his eyes could not fully see. But the wind followed him in, threading through the woods with a low, constant moan. It tugged at the treetops, setting them swaying, creaking in protest. The sound crept under his skin, less like weather and more like warning. The path curved, then dipped. Snow thickened underfoot, no longer the light powder it had been nearer the road. His boots sank deeper with each step, stealing speed. He slowed, frowning, adjusting his stride. "It's fine," he told himself. "You've done this before." Still, unease gathered at the edges of his thoughts. The woods felt different today. Quieter in some ways, louder in others. The usual markers, a split birch, a fallen log, were half buried, blurred into anonymity. The snow erased certainty with every step. He glanced back once, instinctively. The way behind him had already begun to disappear. The wind rose again, stronger now, surging through the trees with a force that sent snow cascading down in sudden, blinding waves. Finley lifted an arm to shield his face, heart thudding harder than the run demanded. For the first time since leaving the highway, doubt cut cleanly through him. He pushed on anyway. Because turning back felt like giving something up. Because the shortcut had always been there for him. Because familiarity had a way of pretending it was the same as safety. And because, somewhere deep down, a part of him still believed that if he just kept moving forward, everything would work itself out. The woods swallowed sound the deeper Finley went. Snow packed itself into every hollow, draping branches, sealing the forest in a thick, unnatural hush. Even his footsteps felt wrong, dull and distant, as though they belonged to someone else running a few seconds behind him. His breath rasped too loud in his ears. He tried to slow it, counting the way he always did, but the rhythm refused to settle. The path dipped again, narrower now. The trees pressed closer, their branches knitting overhead, blocking what little light the storm allowed through. Snow drifted steadily, soft but relentless, blurring the distance into a shifting wall of white and shadow. Finley glanced up. And stopped. At first, his mind refused to assemble what he was seeing. 30 yards ahead, in the middle of the path, stood a man. Not moving. Not turning. Just there, as if he had been placed deliberately in Finley's way. The cold bit harder as understanding crept in. The man wore only a short-sleeved shirt and shorts. No coat. No hat. No gloves. Bare legs streaked with red and blue where skin met snow. His arms hung loosely at his sides, fingers curled slightly inward, darkened by cold. His skin was pale in places, then mottled and purpled, as if the blood beneath it had lost its way. Finley's feet rooted to the ground. The man's face lifted just enough for their eyes to meet. He was smiling. Not a smile of recognition or relief, not the wild gratitude of someone found. It stretched too wide, pulling at the corners of his mouth until it looked painful, unnatural. His eyes were open too far, white stark against the dark pupils, fixed on Finley with an intensity that felt invasive, as though he were being studied rather than seen. No snow clung to the man's eyelashes. No steam rose from his breath. He did not shiver. The wood seemed to lean in. Finley's thoughts collided, scrambled, tried to find order. This isn't real. It can't be. People didn't survive out here dressed like that. Not in this cold. Not in this storm. A hallucination, his mind offered desperately. Exposure. Shock. You're tired. You're cold. This is what happens when you push too hard. He blinked once. Twice. The man did not disappear. Finley took a careful step back. Snow compressed beneath his boot with a muted crunch that sounded far too loud. The man's head tilted, just slightly, the grin never faltering, eyes tracking the movement with unsettling precision. "Hey," Finley called, his voice thinner than he expected. Are you hurt?" The word hurt felt laughably inadequate. No answer came. The forest held its breath. Finley's pulse hammered. He thought of his father's warnings, of his mother's quiet insistence on caution. He thought, irrationally, of Mara waiting by the window, counting the minutes without knowing she was counting. He took another step back. The man's chest expanded. And then he screamed. The sound tore through the woods, raw and animal, stripped of anything human. It wasn't a call for help or a cry of fear. It was pure release, a jagged, unfiltered sound that scraped against Finley's nerves and sent a shock straight down his spine. Birds burst from the trees overhead, wings beating wildly as they scattered into the storm. Before Finley could react, the man lunged forward. Snow sprayed under bare feet as he charged, fast and unsteady, arms pumping with frantic strength. The grin twisted into something feral, mouth open wide as the scream broke into harsh, gasping breaths. Finley's body moved before his mind caught up. He turned and ran. Adrenaline flooded him, sharp and burning, lending speed to legs already tired. Branches lashed at his arms and face as he tore through the narrow path, boots slipping, barely catching. His lungs screamed for air, each breath tearing in and out too fast, too shallow. Behind him, he heard it, footfalls, irregular but closing, punctuated by hoarse, broken sounds that might once have been words. "Don't look back." He didn't. He couldn't. The path twisted unexpectedly, snow obscuring its edges. Finley stumbled, barely managing to stay upright as his foot caught on something buried beneath the drift. Pain flared up his ankle, but fear drowned it out. He pushed harder, heart battering his ribs like it wanted out. The woods no longer felt familiar. Every tree looked the same. Every turn felt wrong. The storm intensified, wind forcing snow sideways into his eyes, blinding him in brief, terrifying bursts. His thoughts fractured. How is he moving like that? How is he alive? Why was he smiling? A branch cracked loudly to his left, snapping under weight. Finley veered right without thinking, plunging off the path into deeper snow. His legs sank nearly to the knee, stealing momentum. He cursed aloud, fighting to pull free, panic clawing at his throat. The sounds behind him grew closer. Too close. Finley burst through a stand of young trees and nearly collided with a fallen trunk half buried in snow. He vaulted it clumsily, landing hard on the other side, pain exploding up his shin. He staggered but stayed upright, forcing himself onward. His chest burned now, every breath sharp and ragged. The cold no longer felt distant, it gnawed at him, creeping into sweat-damp layers, stealing heat with ruthless efficiency. Somewhere ahead, the trees thinned. He could sense it, the faint change in light, the wind cutting sharper through gaps. The highway. If he could just reach the road. Another scream ripped through the storm, closer than before. Finley's resolve cracked, fear turning brittle and bright. He ran with everything he had left, driven by instinct alone. Snow swallowed his boots, branches tore at him, the woods closing ranks behind. The shortcut he had trusted all his life had become a trap. And whatever was chasing him out here did not belong to the store. Finley ran. The word barely covered it. He tore through the woods with no thought for form or pace, legs driving blindly through snow that fought every step. Drifts swallowed his shins, sometimes his knees, dragging at him like hands. He shouted, once, twice, again, his voice cracking and vanishing into the storm as though the woods absorbed sound out of spite. Help! Someone, help! Nothing answered but the wind. His lungs burned, every breath a ragged tear. Cold sliced into the sweat beneath his jacket, shockingly sharp, stealing warmth faster than he could generate it. Panic narrowed his vision until the world became a tunnel of white and dark trunks rushing past. Behind him. He didn't need to look. He could feel the man there. Not hear him exactly. That was the worst part. No steady footfalls. No labored breathing. Just the certainty of pursuit, like pressure between the shoulder blades, like eyes on his back. When Finley risked a glance over his shoulder, terror punched the air from his chest. The man was closer. Impossibly closer. He was running full tilt now, bare legs flashing against the snow, skin darkened to bruised purples and reds, yet moving with a speed that made no sense. Finley's boots carved deep prints behind him, chaotic and desperate. The man's feet barely seemed to touch the ground. No footprints. The snow behind him lay smooth. Untouched. That realization hit harder than the cold. This isn't real. This can't be real. His mind scrambled for explanations the way it always had, logic first, even now. Hypothermia. Hallucinations. Adrenaline doing something strange to perception. He clung to those thoughts like a rope, but they frayed almost instantly. Hallucinations didn't scream. They didn't chase. They didn't close distance. The woods seemed endless. The path had long since dissolved into guesswork and instinct, every turn a gamble. Time stretched and warped. Seconds dragged, then vanished entirely. His legs felt both leaden and weightless, pain blurring into something distant and abstract. He fell once. His foot punched through a crust of snow into emptiness, and the ground dropped out from under him. He hit hard, the impact jarring his teeth, knocking the breath clean from his lungs. Snow filled his mouth, icy and choking. He scrambled, clawing at the ground, terror spiking so sharply it bordered on clarity. He felt it then. Warmth. Not from himself, but close. Too close. Finley surged upright and ran again, screaming without words, sound ripped from his throat in something raw and animal. His body screamed at him to stop, to curl up, to give in to the cold and the impossible fear snapping at his heels. He didn't. He ran for Mara. For his father. For the cottage standing stubborn against the moors. For every tomorrow he had promised himself he would reach. The storm worsened, wind slamming into him head-on now, snow blinding and merciless. His world shrank to the next step, the next breath, the next desperate lunge forward. Then, light. Not the dim, swallowed glow of the woods, but open light. Street light. Amber and unreal against the white. The road. With a sob that bordered on laughter, Finley burst from the trees and stumbled onto the highway. The wind hit him full force, nearly knocking him over, but he didn't stop. He ran until his legs finally gave out, collapsing to his knees in the snow at the center of the deserted road. He gasped, sucking air like he'd never breathed before. His chest convulsed. His hands shook violently as he pressed them to the ground, grounding himself, proving he was still here. Still alive. The world felt too big, too open, the silence suddenly deafening after the claustrophobic woods. For a moment, he just knelt there, panting, tears freezing on his lashes. Then dread crept in. Slow. Certain. He turned. The tree lean loomed dark and still, branches bowed under snow. No movement. No bare limbs cutting through white. No scream. No charging figure tearing out after him. Nothing. The woods looked exactly as they should have. Quiet. Empty. Harmless. Finley scanned left, then right, heart hammering as hard as it had during the chase. The road stretched on in both directions, deserted and pristine, his own footprints the only disruption in the snow. Gone. The word echoed hollowly. Relief flooded him so fast it made him dizzy. He laughed once, broken and hysterical, pressing a shaking hand to his mouth to smother the sound. His body slumped forward, forehead resting against his sleeve as he fought to pull himself back together. It's over. You're safe. You made it. Why, eat even. Finley ran. Snow tore at his shins as his legs punched through the drifts, each step heavier than the last. His breath came in broken, ragged pulls that burned his throat raw. He screamed, once, twice, his voice cracking into the white nothingness, swallowed instantly by wind and trees. No echo. No answer. The woods absorbed everything. He risked a glance over his shoulder. The man was closer. Too close. His bare feet skimmed the snow without sinking, moving with a speed that made no sense, arms swinging loose and wild. There were no footprints behind him. None. Just smooth, untouched snow where he should have been struggling, slipping, slowing. The grin was still there, stretched wide, unchanging, as if carved into his face. Panic tipped into something colder. This isn't possible. Finley pushed harder, muscles screaming in protest. Time warped. Seconds dragged, then vanished. His legs felt like they had been running forever, like this chase had no beginning and no end, only motion and fear and that presence behind him that refused to fall back. The storm thickened, snow blinding him in sudden bursts. He veered instinctively, following slopes, gaps, any suggestion of open space. His lungs felt close to tearing. Black spots crowded his vision. Another scream came from behind him, closer now, not angered, not strained. Exultant. Something in Finley broke. He sobbed once, The sound ripped from him without permission, and stumbled forward with whatever strength remained. Then, abruptly, the trees thinned. Wind slammed into him full force, harder, colder. He burst out of the woods and onto the road. The highway sprawled before him, pale and wide under the streetlights. Finley staggered several steps out, slipped, and dropped to one knee, hands scraping raw against icy asphalt. He gasped, chest heaving, vision swimming. He spun around. The woods stood still. Snow drifted quietly at the tree line. No movement. No sound. No half-naked figure tearing after him. Gone. Finley scanned wildly, heart hammering so hard it hurt. The path where he'd emerged lay smooth and untouched. No broken branches. No disturbed snow. No footprints at all, except his own, staggering and frantic, leading out of the trees. He laughed once, sharp and hysterical. Hallucination. That had to be it. Shock. Cold. Fear twisting his senses. But when he closed his eyes, the grin lingered, burned into his mind with awful clarity. Wide. Knowing. Patient. As if the chase had ended only because it chose to. Finley followed the road home. He did not run again. His legs shook too badly for that. Instead, he walked fast, boots crunching through snow, every nerve stretched tight. He glanced over his shoulder every few steps, certain, absolutely certain, that the moment he stopped looking, something would be there. The road remained empty. Streetlights hummed softly overhead. Snow fell straight down now, almost gentle. The quiet felt wrong, like a held breath. He forced himself to look at the ground. Footprints marked the road behind him. Only his. Uneven, frantic at first, then slowly steadier as he put distance between himself and the woods. No second set. No bare feet. Nothing following. That frightened him more than proof would have. If the man wanted him, tracking would be effortless. He had crossed snow without leaving a trace. Distance meant nothing. The road, the lights, the open sky, none of it felt like protection anymore. By the time the cottage came into view, Finley was shaking uncontrollably. Light spilled from the windows, warm and familiar. Smoke curled from the chimney. For a moment, it looked impossibly fragile, like a memory rather than a place. He nearly cried at the sight of it. He burst through the door and slammed it shut behind him, sliding the bolt home with numb fingers before his legs finally gave out. He sank to the floor, back against the door, breath coming in harsh, uneven gulps. Finley. His father was there instantly, alarm sharp in his voice. Mara appeared behind him, eyes wide. "You're frozen," his father said, already hauling him up, guiding him toward the fire. "What happened? Why were you out in this?" Hands pressed a blanket around his shoulders. Someone thrust a mug into his shaking grip. Heat burned against his palms, barely registering. Finley swallowed. His mouth felt full of sand. There was someone. In the woods. The room stilled. His father's jaw tightened. "What do you mean, someone?" Finley told them. Not everything, he couldn't, but enough. The man. The clothes. The grin. The chase. Words tumbled out, disordered, clumsy, but the terror threaded through them unmistakably. Silence followed. His father stood abruptly. I'm getting my coat. No, Mara said, the word sharp and sudden. She crossed the room and grabbed Finley's arm, fingers digging in as if he might vanish. Don't go. His father hesitated, torn between instinct and reason. If someone's out there. There's no one out there, Finley said quickly, though his voice betrayed him. Not now. Please. Reluctantly, his father sat back down. The fire crackled. The clock ticked. Outside, the storm eased into something deceptively calm. Hours passed that way. No knock came at the door. No sound from the moors. Mara never let go of Finley's sleeve, her grip loosening only when sleep finally claimed her, head resting against his side. His father watched the window long into the night, face set, eyes hollow. Finley stared into the fire and practiced breathing slowly, evenly, the way he did after a hard run. He nodded at the right moments. He spoke when spoken to. He pretended calm. Inside, terror coiled tight and patient. Because he knew, with a certainty deeper than logic, that what he had seen was not finished with him. And somewhere beyond the reach of the firelight, something was waiting. Sleep took Finley unevenly, dragging him under and spitting him back out in fragments. The fire had burned low. The house creaked softly, settling into the cold. His dreams were shapeless and tense, full of motion without direction. Then came the sound. A sharp rattle against glass. Finley's eyes flew open. For a heartbeat, he lay still, every muscle locked, listening. The wind had eased, the night was too quiet for chance. The sound came again, deliberate this time. A branch scraping the bedroom window. His pulse thudded painfully in his ears. It's nothing, he told himself. Just the storm clearing debris. Just. He sat up anyway. The room felt wrong. Too still. Too expectant. Finley swung his legs over the bed and moved closer to the window, each step careful, silent. His breath fogged in front of him. He could see the curtain shifting slightly, as though brushed from the outside. With a sudden, reckless motion, he grabbed the fabric and yanked it aside. The man was there. Inches from the glass. His skin was no longer just pale but deep purple now, blotched and stiff, stretched tight over sharp angles. His head was bald, dusted with snow, and a patchy gray beard clung to his jaw like frostbitten moss. His eyes were locked on Finley's with unbearable focus, unblinking, intimate. The grin was gone. What replaced it was worse. A look of intent. Finley dropped out of sight with a strangled yell, crashing to the floor as terror finally broke free of his chest. The sound ripped through the house. His father burst into the room seconds later, light blazing on, boots thudding hard against the floorboards. What? Window! Finley screamed, scrambling backward. He's there. His father crossed the room in 2 strides and tore the curtain back. For a fraction of a second, he saw it. A tall, half-naked figure already pulling away from the glass, moving with impossible speed, feet barely disturbing the snow as it vanished into the white beyond the cottage. Jesus, his father breathed. Mara appeared in the doorway, frozen, eyes darting between them. He's real, Finley sobbed, the words tumbling out of him at last. He's real. His father said nothing. He locked the window. Then the door. Then every bolt the cottage had. His hands shook as badly as Finley's. None of them slept again. The police arrived slowly. Too slowly. Blue lights finally cut through the gray dawn, washing over the snow and stone. Two officers stepped out, shoulders hunched against the cold, skepticism already set into their faces. Finley watched from the doorway, wrapped in a blanket, Mara pressed tight against his side. They listened. They asked questions. They exchanged glances. Then one of them stiffened. "Did you see that?" the officer murmured. They all turned. For a heartbeat, just one, the figure stood at the edge of the yard, partially obscured by drifting snow. Bare skin. Stillness. Watching. Then it slipped away, dissolving into the storm as if it had never been there at all. The officers followed the tracks where it had stood. The prints led toward the woods, deep, erratic, abruptly vanishing beneath wind-blown snow. One officer shook his head. "We're not going in there. Not like this. Night pursuit's too dangerous." Finley's father exploded. "You saw it," he shouted. "You both saw it." "We did," the officer said evenly. "And that's exactly why we're not chasing it blind into the moors." The words landed like a sentence. Helpless rage surged through Finley, hot and bitter. He wanted action. Answers. An ending. Instead, he got procedure and caution and a promise to patrol when daylight held. When the officers finally left, the quiet returned, thick, oppressive. His father sank into a chair, face in his hands. Mara clung to Finley, trembling. Without thinking, Finley pulled them both close. For the first time since the storm began, none of them pretended strength alone. They held each other against the dark. Weeks passed. No further sightings came. No reports from the village. The snow melted, returned, melted again. Slowly, the terror eased its grip, loosening from a constant presence into something quieter, watchful. Finley didn't stop running, but he changed how he did it. Shorter paths. Daylight only. Sometimes Mara came with him, bundled and determined, her breath puffing proudly in the cold. They ran until they laughed, until fear had no room left to speak. Evenings grew warmer in other ways. Finley talked to his father now, really talked. About the accident. About the silence they had built between them. About how fear had forced open what grief had sealed shut. They didn't fix everything. But they stopped pretending nothing was broken. One night, snow fell again, soft, steady, luminous beneath the streetlights. Finley stood at the door for a long moment before stepping outside. The air was cold and clean. The moors lay quiet, vast but no longer hostile. He was not alone inside the house. That knowledge grounded him. Finley took a few steps into the falling snow, looked once toward the woods, then back at the warm glow behind him. Beautiful. This time, not unnatural. Just winter passing through. Cinematic visuals and atmosphere expansion. The empty highway. A wide, static shot. Snow-coated asphalt stretching endlessly under amber streetlights. No motion. No sound but wind. The sense that the world has paused. The figure in summer clothes. A slow push-in through drifting snow. The man stands impossibly still, bare skin bruised purple against white. His breath does not fog. His grin is the only movement. The woods chase. Handheld, frantic camera. Snow whipping past the lens. The man gaining ground without effort. No footprints. No heavy breathing. Just relentless closeness. The window reveal. Silence. A bedroom lit dimly. Curtain snaps open, smash cut to the man's face inches from the glass. Eye contact held too long. No music. Only Finley's scream. Final snowfall. Wide, calm framing. Gentle snow. Warm light spilling from the cottage. Finley stepping outside, steady now, the threat absent but remembered, proof of survival rather than fear. The horror never fully explained. Only endured. And that is what makes it stay.